Right. Welcome to stream number 9 of my Making a Game series. Alrighty. I think it's about 8 o'clock here. Just refreshing everything, making sure everything's working right. As soon as I hear some audio, I will get the show on the road. Alright, audio sounds good. Cool. So, alright. Let's see here. YouTube working? YouTube looks like it's working. Cool. All right. So let's get this show on the road. Let me post out some links real quick. All right. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing what I like to call an art pass on the app. So if you've been watching before, if you haven't been watching, where we currently are in the app is pretty much all just what we call gray box or white box. Well, in this case, blue. But effectively, everything is just cubes or squares or rectangles or whatever you want to say, and everything is just set up with gray or white and some simple colors like blue and whatever, some orange and that. But nothing is really actual, production grade art, you know what I mean? None of the art that you see in the game right now is art that I want to actually ship with. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to update this with some actual, quote unquote shippable art. So me not being necessarily an artist for sure, even though I do have some art background, my go-to move for this is usually to download some type of UI kit, either from the Unity Asset Store. There's some other websites where you can find them, but most commonly I've been just using the Unity Asset Store since obviously it's made with Unity in mind if it's being put up on the Unity Asset Store. Which usually means that everything is going to come in pretty nicely and work quite well. So anyways, so if you haven't been watching, what I did recently was I posted a straw poll. So the straw poll had a bunch of different links to content packs in the Unity Asset Store, okay? And what I did was I wanted you guys, the viewers, to vote. So I've had this up for, I don't know, about 2 weeks or so. And I said, okay, whatever's going to have the most votes, that's what I'm going to use. So let's go ahead and see what has the most votes. I'm pretty sure I know what it is. I don't want to vote, sorry. Results, that's what I want. Cool. So yeah, so we got 20 votes, not too bad. And overwhelming favorite was this one, which is the Cleric UI. So what's kind of interesting about this is this UI is actually very, very different than your average kind of mobile game. So again, if you missed the previous stream where I talked about effectively what our asset list was, or our requirements, what we needed out of these UI kits, pretty much all we needed was some button backgrounds, some window backgrounds, and some things like stars or gems or somehow some type of reward graphic. So yeah, so pretty much I think everything that we would need is available in here. This actually has quite a bit of stuff. You can see it's $40. I mean, I think it's a pretty legit art pack. Obviously designed for more of like an adventure RPG style kind of game or whatever, but that doesn't mean we can't adapt it to what we're doing in our app, which is just a simple puzzle game. The key is that it has things like buttons, so you can see obviously it has buttons. It has window frames, pop-up windows, stuff like that. These are all things, I mean, here's a nice little pre-baked kind of main menu kind of thing. Let's see here, loading bars, scrollable windows, account names, even some more kind of stylized character graphics and stuff. So yeah, so anyways, so this is what you guys wanted, so this is what I went ahead and picked. So anyways, so I've already went and downloaded this from the Unity Asset Store, so Cleric UI, so you can see it here. So at this point, anyways, Unity Asset Store, if you guys are unfamiliar, you can find it really easy. So window, Asset Store, or you can go to the Asset Store like in your web browser as well. Both of those options work. And then after you find something you like, you can purchase it as tied to an account, and then at that point you can download it and then import it into your Unity project. So let's kind of so just kind of trying to keep this organized. So let's go ahead and import this. So I kind of took a quick look at the asset store link that I had up before, and it looks like it comes with a bunch of PNGs and then a bunch of PSD, so Photoshop files, all within the pack. So and a couple fonts as well. So what we want is, we don't need every single piece of art that was in that pack. So even though it's downloading I guess importing right now, but the entire pack, we don't necessarily need everything from there. So I don't want to go ahead and put so you can see how many, holy crap, how many images are actually in this pack. It's a pretty ridiculous amount. So we don't actually want all of these images in our app for sure. So pretty much what I want to grab is I want to grab the documentation, the fonts, and the PSD files. So all of these already pre-generated PNGs, I don't want to import any of those. And the main reason behind that is, number one, there's a ton of them, and obviously we need a very small subset of them, maybe 10 different images total for the whole app. Number one. Then number two, the secondary problem is that when all these images are exported to PNGs, they're exported at a certain resolution. So that resolution is going to be fixed. So meaning that if the image is exported at 64 pixels by 64 pixels, and then in our app we need to display it at 512 by 512 pixels, what's going to happen is that image is going to look really blurry. But I already read through the description of this, and it looks like all these PSD files, all of the graphics are created using smart objects, which are pretty much like vector art, meaning that you can scale them, pretty much infinitely, and you're just going to have a mathematical calculation is going to determine what it should look like as it scales. So the nice part about that is we can go into these PSD files and we can scale these images to whatever size that we want. Meaning that if we need it at 512 or if we need it at 256, we can just export it out at that resolution, and we don't have to worry excuse me, about what it's already been exported out as. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to grab the fonts, which we might need depending on what we're doing, the documentation, and then the PSD files. So let's import this. So I wish Unity had an option to say import to a folder outside of the project directory, but unfortunately they don't. So we have this Cleric UI now. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to, let's see here, minimize that. I'm actually going to drag this over into my desktop of my computer. And then, so it looks like, yeah, everything got dragged into there. And then I'm also going to search for some meta files and just nuke all the meta files. So remember, meta files are just files generated that you need for Unity itself. So we don't need any of those meta files anymore, so I just nuked those. So really the big thing here is I just want all these PSD files. So we can go back into Unity now, and we can minimize that. So what I want to do is I want to take all these PSD files and I want to start opening them up in Photoshop and figuring out, okay, what are in these? You know what I mean? Because what I want to do is I want to go through these PSD files. I want to find the elements that I need in the app and then export those into the Unity project. So that way the Unity project will only have inside of it the PNGs that we're actually going to use in the app. All the source art is just going to live out here for now on my desktop. So okay, so let's read some of these things and let's see what's all here. So one of the things we're definitely going to need, so let's kind of start thinking about what kind of art we're going to need. So we're definitely going to need, let's see here, generic button. Ooh, generic button. And then inside of that, we're going to need a normal state. We're going to need a highlight. Well, I guess we don't really need a highlight state because this is mobile, and mobile you don't really have a highlight. But we definitely need a normal, a pressed, and then a disabled. So, well, that's not spelled disabled. So you can do a couple different things in Unity when it comes to buttons. So you can, if you want, so let's kind of look at a button real quick and kind of go over this. So since we obviously have a button, we don't need that asset store link anymore. So if you look at one of our buttons, so Unity has, excuse me, a couple different options inside of the transitions, okay? So you can either do none, which literally does nothing when you're hovering over it, clicking on it, or any of those things. You can do color tint, which we're currently doing, which is going to take the graphic that's there and it's going to apply a different tint based on what you have set here. So for example, and it's like an additive tint. So our disabled color, okay, you can see it sets us to 50% opacity and adds a little bit of gray. So see when I turn this off, see how the play button changes to the disabled state when I make it uninteractable. So yeah, so the same thing is you can use sprites, so different images that we could export out and say, okay, this is what it looks like when it's pressed, this is what it looks like when it's not pressed, stuff like that. So those are things you can do. I think for now, we're just going to we're gonna see what color tint gets us, and then we can go and do another pass where we add a little more polish on top of it and possibly do different images for pressed and disabled. But for now, let's just do the color tint. So what else are we gonna need? So we're gonna need a background. So that's definitely, because right now we just have this white background across the app. We're definitely going to need a background. We might want to have multiple backgrounds, but for sure we're definitely going to need at least one background. Then we're definitely going to need a window background / frame. I don't know what we want to call it, so just window frame. So what this is going to do for us is this is going to be, so in our cases, let's hit play here real quick. So in our cases where we have this kind of pop-up window, we want to have a nice little frame that pops up there that shows us things like, oh, okay, you know, it can hold a title, it can hold some text, and then, you know, these are can just be our generic button for right now. And then what else are we going to need? So I'm trying to think. We'll definitely need our what do we need? We'll need some stars or some gems. I think I saw some gems. So let's go with gems for results. And let's see here for results and level select. So if you remember, if we go into our level select, currently we have these bubbles. So let's replace those with like some gems to show, okay, how many gems have you gotten? Is it locked out at this current moment? All that stuff. I'm trying to remember what we do for that. Do we turn those on, turn those off? Okay, it looks like we just have, okay, so right now we just have 3 images that we're tinting. So we might actually need to update the logic here to do, instead of tinting, to do a sprite swap where we show one graphic or another graphic. We also might be able to get away with tinting, we'll see, but I think most likely we're going to want to do a sprite swap. So, alrighty. So yeah, so let's kind of just go and start trying to find some of these things. So we already have our texture directory here, so we can just kind of start throwing stuff in here. Let's just create a UI folder in there, and then let's go to Photoshop and let's start opening some of these images. So let's see here. I guess we could start by probably just trying to find a button. I don't know what's in here. Let's see. Chart portrait. So let's go in here and let's just kind of open the first one. And most likely inside of here, we're going to have a button. That would be my guess somewhere in this image. So let's see here. All right. So it doesn't look like in this image there's any buttons, or at least any buttons that I want to use. So let's kind of look at some more of these. Let's see if there's anything in this one. Ah, okay. So nice. So this, so you can see this setup. So everything here is broken into specific like layers that have different things in them. So is that stack splits? That's like all those things. So you have, I don't even know what that is. Oh, there we go. Just another one with tabs. Okay. So what's nice about this is this has a lot of different elements that we can use for our app. So first off, it has a window here. Okay, it's a couple different sizes, but that's fine. Excuse me. A window here that we can resize to fit whatever we need in our application. So that's great. So that number one that we need. So we said we need a window background and frame, and that looks like a pretty cool little pop-up window background and frame. So we can definitely use that. And then some of the other things that we need. So that background. So I'm assuming once I start kind of turning some of these layers off. Okay, so let's look at, yeah, that one's fine. Okay, and then just kind of zoom in. So yeah, so it looks like, what's the difference between these? Is there any really big difference? I don't think so. Okay. So yeah, so we can use, it looks like it already has a background built into the frame, so that's great. So we can use that. Yeah, so it looks like this should be pretty much all we need for the window. So let's kind of get rid of some of the random stuff in here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new image, and I'm going to make this, I'm trying to think how big our window needs to be. So obviously at the largest scale, it needs to be somewhere around like 1920 by 1080 if it was filling the whole screen, or even on, I know there's some higher res phones that are like 2560 by 1440. So it needs to somewhat support that. So we should probably make this image like Unity sliceable, or Unity, what do they call it? I think they call it slice in Unity for those images. Let's see here, Unity. Let's go to an image real quick. So, and of course I don't have an image set for any of these. So let's just go background. Yeah, sliced. So what we'll probably do is we'll make sure that this image can be sliced in Unity. And to do that, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is just make sure that it has a nice border. And as long as the border is nice, you can make it a sliced image in Unity pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to here. And I'm going to figure out what in here I actually want. So I don't care about that. I do want that. That's kind of like my little header. Don't care about that. Don't care about the button for now. Don't care about the items. And okay, so the box I do care about. So let's see here. I'm assuming we have some font in here that I don't care about. Texture heading, close button. Okay, we do care about the close button. Let's see here. Yeah, this is where the fun boring part of kind of doing what I like to call the art pass is, which is going through and taking all these UI elements and making them kind of game ready assets, if that makes sense. So sometimes you get packs where like this one did have some that were already set as, quote unquote game ready, which is great if that exists. But the issue with that is there was like 5 bajillion of them, and honestly, I would rather just go through and make them exactly what I want them to be versus trying to deal with somebody else's thing. So let's see here. So we definitely, okay, so we want this whole stash thing. So let's just move that in here for right now. Okay, so we're going to go here. And of course, it's huge. So we're going to scale that down a little bit. Just fit our... Okay. Bigger. Come on. All right. So what I want to do is, like I said, I want to make this nice and scalable. So there's a couple different things that I can do right now. I could export this out as one entire kind of image that can be bordered and sliced in Unity Sprite System. I could do that. Obviously, I want to remove the text wherever the heck that text is, but okay, cool. So yeah, so I could just export this out right now into Unity and set the border up in Unity, and it would be able to work. So I can actually kind of show that. So file, save as. We can just call this PNG. We'll call this window. I'm gonna put UI in front of all my UI images. So let's go back into Unity. So now our image is in here. Cool. So since this is going to be UI images, we want to make sure that we set all these up as sprites. So we're going to do sprite mode single. Alpha is transparency. We don't want to generate bitmaps. For right now, we're just going to set everything to uncompressed 32-bit, and we might come back and switch these things to some type of compression based on where our memory footprint is. But I mean, honestly, this app should not be very large, whether no matter how many images I'm using, because really I'm not going to be using that many images, and Unity already does batching for you. So like if all these images use the same background image, that image is only loaded into memory once. It's not loaded into memory 3 times. So we hopefully don't have any too many issues there. But so let's just go to a new scene, and we're just gonna call this probably like our UI sandbox or something like that. And then that way we can so let's go file, new scene. That way we can kind of play around with these things and go through and kind of create some prefabs for them. So let's create a new scene. Let's save this scene. We're going to call this UI sandbox. Cool. I'm going to throw this inside the tools. Okay. So now in here, we just want to create, let's see here, create a, actually what I want to do is I want to go to menu and I want to make sure I'm using the same kind of setup that we're using in here. So I'm just going to copy and paste that into UI sandbox. And then, does this have anything else in here that I care about? I don't think so. Okay, so I don't need a directional light. And my camera is going to have a color background. Okay. All right, so again, so this is kind of what our main menu is looking like. So we're going to go through and we're going to delete all this UI that's in here because we don't care about that right now. Okay, and then we're going to save, and then let's go and let's just create a UI image. So this UI image we're going to use as kind of a way to test out that our window background that we just brought in. So here's our window. So obviously it's freaking tiny. So let's grow this up. So as you can see, what's nice, oh wow, why is that not, oh shoot. So it looks like I do not have any transparency in here. Oh yeah, because that background layer's on. Okay. One second, I just want to save that again. Alright, cool. Okay, cool. So now our image has transparency. But, okay, anyways, so you can see now with this image in the game, it doesn't look too bad, you know what I mean? And we can scale it however we want. But see, what ends up happening is if you notice, like let's say we wanted the image to look like this, okay? And to have these proportions. Well, the problem with that is now we're going to get a problem where these things are getting scaled and shrunk really, really ugly. The things like the, let's see here, what are we calling these? Are like the back button or the close button and then whatever this little thing is. So it looks terrible. That doesn't look good. So when you're exporting out an image like this, like we're doing, pretty much you need to be able to preserve the aspect if it's just a simple image over here. So that number one, okay? Number two, the problem with exporting it out like this and using it as a simple image is you're gonna run into a situation where if your image is too small, so let's say our image is tiny. Let's say our image is 64 by 64. What you're what you're going to end up having is you're going to end up with a blurry image on the screen. So that's why we don't want to just export this out as, you know, quote unquote simple image. We want to instead, export this out as a sliceable image, okay? So we could take this image already that we have. So again, this one that we have here, which I think we have is 512 by 512. Yeah, 512 by 512. So this image that's 512 by 512, we can take this image, go into Unity Sprite Editor, and set up a border and kind of slice it ourselves if we wanted. So I can show how that's done. So effectively, inside the Sprite Editor, you select where is the last point at which needs to not scale, if that makes sense. So if we were scaling horizontally, okay, we would want all of these graphics, all of this nice little stuff here on the end, our start button, all that stuff, we want that to stay intact. So what we want to scale is we just want to scale this inner area, okay? So if we set it up to have a border, something like this, so let's see here, we could do probably 200 and 200. So you can either drag these lines here or you can manually type stuff in. So, so you can see that what is on the left and what is on the right, that's what's not going to be scaled when we set this to a sliced image. So I hit apply, and then let's go back to the image, okay, and then let's set the image to sliced, okay. So what you can see is when I'm scaling this, even though it looks freaking terrible because of the way it's sliced, again, I will go into that later, but what you can see, even though it's pretty hard to see, is this stuff on the outside is not necessarily being scaled. What's happening is it's filling out this inner area. So it's saying, okay, whatever's in there, let's automatically, like through like a shader, through code or whatever, let's fill in that information with auto-generated information. But what's nice about that is I can make this super, super wide, okay, and it would look fine, okay, as long as the source image was set up correctly, okay. But since our source image is not set up correctly, it gets it to look kind of funky. Now, we can go back in here and we can keep tweaking the sprite here in the sprite editor. So here, I can probably make this a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to see at the same time probably. And then, so we can keep tweaking this. I don't think it updates live, even if I hit apply. We can see though. Apply. Okay, it kind of does. So if I set these super far in, what you can see is effectively it's being stretched more in the center. I don't know how well you can see this on stream, but the center is being stretched more. Now, if I start bringing this out, so like let's say I brought this out to here and hit apply. So you can see now the part that's being affected is different now. So when I would, let's go back here. So now when I would scale this, you can see that the part that's changing is now different than it was before, because that border, which you can see in the bottom right, the dashed lines is the border. So the border is like right on the outside of that kind of circle there on the left. You can see that part doesn't change, but everything in between that stretches. Okay. Oh, and here's a good example. If I don't hit fill center, you can actually see what's changing in there. So everything that's inside of that, inside of where you mark as the border, that's quote unquote filling. Okay. So now this raw image here is not set up correctly for you to have a border like that. Now you could set it up so that way the border was like this. Probably like something like that. That looks better. This and like this. Actually, what I want is I want this all the way up there. Okay, something like that. All right. So now if I hit apply, then we go back in here. So you can see again what's happening. Oh man. So what's happening is just this image is just giant. So what's causing is when I stretch it down, you can see it's, again, just filling in that center. So if I don't have that in there, you can see what it's not filling. Okay? But we can very easily go into Photoshop and fix this so that way it is very, quote-unquote, scalable, if that makes sense. So the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, and to give you kind of more freedom in Unity with a smaller amount of assets, so therefore making your app smaller, okay, is that you can go, and let me delete this. I'm going to create another folder in here, and I'm just going to call this window, because we're going to put a bunch of different window elements. So if you go into, that's not Photoshop. So if I go back to Photoshop, and I look at this now, and instead of looking this as one, global piece, if instead I start looking at this as one, excuse me, as a bunch of individual pieces, we can export those individual pieces out, and then we can build our window in Unity, save it as a prefab, and make it really easy for it to scale correctly. So let's go ahead and let's start breaking this down into smaller pieces. So let's kind of start turning a bunch of stuff off. Okay, so this is our box. All right, so we're going to start with that, but then we also have, let's see here, what all do we have in here? So we have a box. So if we say, I kind of like that bottom frame on there. So let's say this is our generic box, okay? So we want to be able to have this box be much, much smaller in its source image, but then use that fill center on the border in the slice inside Unity to make it larger. So it's pretty simple what we can do here. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to go and start selecting parts of this to just like nuke out of here. So if I go to box, and then let's see here. So if we zoom in, you can see a little bit better where the detail kind of stops. And oh, what the heck, maybe? Yeah, thank you. You can see where the detail kind of stops. So if we get really deep in here, so you can see like there's a little bit of detail here, and then it kind of stops right here, and the rest of it becomes very, very generic. Even though there are a little bit of kind of fun things in there, so maybe we want to keep some of those, but I don't really care. So I'm going to go about right here, and then go over to about right here, and then I'm just going to nuke that. Well, maybe. Wait, why didn't it let me delete that? Why are you mad? Why are you mad? Because it's clear the pixels in a group cannot be edited without. Oh, okay. That's not a problem. So so what's nice is we know we're not going to need our image to be bigger than 512 by 512 where we're currently at. So even though these are smart images, and again, I'm not editing the actual, the original PSD, I'm just editing this new one that I created up here. So we can actually merge these layers and then delete that. And then we can grab those, or grab individual ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to go deselect, which is Alt. There we go. And I'm going to grab this, and then I'm going to move this over until it touches over here. And then let's make sure that's good. I think that's good. Cool. So yeah, so what you can see is I cut out a bunch of this image because I know I'm going to be slicing it inside of Unity. So I don't need to have all of that horizontal pixel data in there. So now the same thing can be applied to the vertical pixel data as well. So what's nice is I can go in here and I can figure out where, I would say this is pretty much straight that whole way on both sides. So I can go somewhere around here and somewhere around here, and then I can delete that. And then I can grab this top piece and then move it down onto here. And then just move, oh, maybe. Okay, move it down onto there. And now that huge box that we had before is now turned into this really small box. Okay, so what now we can do is, so we can go, just make sure there's nothing else in this image, but I can create a new image now based on this. So file, new, that's going to be much, much smaller. So I would say probably, I don't know, 128 by 128, something like that. And then, yeah, how many times am I going to hit the Windows key? A lot, probably. Okay, and that fits almost perfect. Whew, very close. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller to fit in here, right? Okay. Okay. And then I'm going to delete this background. And then let's bring this into Unity. So we're going to save, file, save as, and then we're going to go into our window folder, and we're just going to call this UI window background. Frame. We'll call it frame. So UI window frame. So yeah, so I'm using a prefix UI, so that way if I ever want to write any tools or search for it really easily, I can just search for anything that's UI underscore. And then window, so that's the type. So what it belongs to, so effectively what folder is it in here. And then frame, what piece of the window is it, okay? So I can save that there. So that's number one, what I can do. Now, if I go back into Unity, and I grab that, and I set everything up on this correctly, so I set it to sprite, and then I set it to single, and then let's see here, I set to transparency, turn off map, hit apply. Again, I want these to both be set to RGBA 32-bit, RGBA 32-bit, hit apply, apply. Cool. So there's no compression being done on these, which is good. So that way we can, like, we can always add compression later if we need to, but at first I want to be able to test without compression to make sure everything's looking correct. Okay, so now, if we switch this to sliced, it's going to yell at us because we haven't set up the border yet. So we need to go into this image, and we need to set up a border for this. So for us, the border is going to be something like that, something like that, and then for the vertical, something like this, and something like this. So again, we just want to make sure that our lines are not overlapping with any of the kind of like custom art or the changes in the art. Otherwise, it's going to fill and look funky. So now we come back in here. We can set this back to sliced at some point here. And fill center. Okay, so what we see now is we see that it sliced it, and what's nice is we can make this any size we want. Now, we have a problem. Okay, what's the problem? The problem is that if you can tell, the corners and stuff are way smaller than we probably wanted them to be, which is fine. So the reason that is because the corner data is well, anything that's not being filled, so as you can see, anything that's not white at this point is being taken at it's kind of like its raw pixel data, if that makes sense. So since those things are in such a small image, that like 128 by 128, it's making it so much smaller in here. Now, this is just to prove a point here. This is not the way you should be doing this, and we'll do it differently here in a second. But if I took this image, is it? I thought it was, no? Hotkeys. I'm forgetting hotkeys. So canvas size, image size. Okay. So if we take this image and make it 512 by 512, so first of all, it's going to be super blurry because like the pixel data doesn't actually exist for that. So we don't want, well, it exists, but it was originally converted from that smart object to a rasterized object at a much lower resolution, so it looks crappy. But that's irrelevant for this. What I want to do is I want to prove a point, which is what happens when you change the size of your source image. So I'm just going to call this window frame large. Okay, and then save. Okay, everything's great. Let's go back to Unity. Alright, so set that to sprite, single, office transparency, hit apply. Again, we don't want both of these to be RGBA 32-bit, RGBA 32-bit, hit apply. Okay, so now if we do that same slice that we did on our previous image, which I can go back to that image and see what it was. So 61, 38, 61, 84. So 61, 38. Was it 61, 84, I think? Does that look right? That doesn't look right. Yeah, revert. Ah, shoot. Okay. So yeah, I forgot. These values are not normalized. So, okay, so we're just going to have to do this manually, which is not a problem. It should take like 2 seconds. Like that. That works. Hit apply. Okay. So now if we use that image instead, so let's dupe this. Let's just call this large. And then this one was, well, whatever. We can just keep it like that. So large. Okay. So now you can see, look how much bigger our lower frame is, the lower part of the frame is. So even though we're scaling these things to roughly the same size, well, I guess we're scaling them to exactly the same size, you know, but, well, it's because our border's different. Whatever, beside the point. So the point is, we're scaling these to the same size. So the fill information is going to be exactly the same. The difference is the part that we're not kind of stretching or filling, these bottom, like the parts outside of our border, okay? These pieces, we want to be able to determine how big these are. So the way that you're actually going to determine that is the size of your source image. So let's see here, so let's look in here. I would say, I don't know if we want those to be a little bit bigger. That looks about, I think, right on the size we want. So let's go back into the Photoshop image and let's actually look at what they were using in the example. Where's that at? It's hidden somewhere. Let's dock that. Let's dock that. Okay. So yeah, so that, I would assume if we treated this as kind of like our full screen here, and then we went back into here. So yeah, that seems to be about the right size. So what that did altogether was that showed us, okay, we probably want the size of our source image for this background piece to be 512 by 512, okay, which is fine and great and not an issue. But the issue we currently have is that the source image is super blurry. So what we need to do is we need to go back and kind of do some of the steps that we already did, and we need to make them fit this image much better. So what we can do pretty simply is, what's that? Is this one 512 by 512? This was our 512 image, right? I think it was. Yeah, so that's our 512 image. So we can go back to here. And well, actually, I'm just going to nuke this one. We don't need that one anymore. We can go back to here. And we know the piece that we want is this box down here. Okay. So we're just going to drag this box into our image up here. Okay. And then we're going to scale this until the box matches the size that's going to be in here. Okay. But remember, since these are smart objects, we can scale these super easily and it's not a problem. So we'll just keep scaling this and then until we get to about the size that we want. So it's a little too big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Okay, I'd say it needs to go a little bit bigger. So let's just make it a little bit bigger and let's just call it good. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, so let's say sure, that looks good. All right, so what's nice is you can see, since these are smart objects and I just scaled it that way, look, this one is super crisp, and this one's the one that we had before that we scaled up from 128 by 128, super blurry. So let's go and let's nuke that one out of here. We don't need that anymore. Now what we can do is we can combine these layers into one layer. We can also delete this grouping. We don't need this grouping anymore. And then now we can go through and do what we were doing before, where we were killing parts of the image and making it fit in here. So it's probably a little bit more difficult just because it's kind of giant like this, but it's not too bad to do this. What we can do is we can change our canvas size and then we can jump our canvas size back down. So let's go to image, canvas size, and let's go to pixels. I don't know where we're at right now, 512. So let's just, let's make it 10 times bigger just to make sure we have enough space to do what we want to do. And then at this point, we just need to effectively create that tiny image that we had created before. So let's drag this in the center too. It's just going to make our life easier later when we change our canvas size back, or our canvas size back smaller. Doop. Okay. So then let's go to our image and let's select the parts that we want to crop out or delete. So delete that. And then we want to grab this and we want to move this down. Delete right here. And let's just line this up with the, oh my gosh, the arrow keys. I think that looks good. Okay. And then let's do the same thing we were doing before on the other sides. Oop, that's the one. That looks about right. Okay. So then let's grab this. And let's move this back over here. Oops. No! Oh, god damn it. Did not want to move that. There we go. Okay, and then just make sure it's lined up properly. That looks good. Okay, cool. So now we just got our box back to where we had it before, but now this time, since it was rasterized at 512 by 512, it should look great in our image. So let's grab this. Oh, it's already grabbed. So, and then let's just kind of put it in the center. Okay. Boom. And then now let's go back to image and canvas size. And let's turn that back to pixels and let's make it 512 by 512 again. Yeah, we know. Yay. So now our image fits perfectly. Now, so the secondary thing that we want to do is since we're planning on not compressing these images, we don't necessarily care that they're square. So if you were going to tile a texture or compress it or do a bunch of other different things in Unity, you would want your image to be squared, so like 512 by 512. But since this is just UI imagery, we don't actually care if that is squared. So what we want is we want to make it as small as possible, just because that's going to give us the smallest image possible, if that makes sense, inside of our or the smallest memory footprint possible for this image. So let's go and let's make it about, I'd say about that big. That looks about right on that front. And then let's shrink it a little bit here and a little bit here, something like that. Okay, that looks like a nice smaller image. So yeah, let's go ahead. Let's see if that looks good. That looks good. So let's go ahead and crop that. Okay, so now what we're going to export is this specific image. So now when we export this out, so PNG, and then we're going to call that window frame, save. Yes, we're going to override that. And then I go back to Unity. So what's cool now is, so let's turn off this large one for a second. So it looks amazing, doesn't it? Yeah. So we need to reset up the border for this. So let's go back to Sprite Editor, and let's just reset the border to what it should be, which is something like that, and something like that. Let's go a little bit here, a little bit here. Okay. And then this needs to go into like here. And then that needs to go to about right there. Cool. So now that we've set up the border, now let's go back. And as you can see, now what we have is we have a fully scalable window that looks really good, pretty much as small as, I guess, this. So it can be as small as, I don't know, whatever, 465 by 347, but on our screen, really small, okay? Or if we wanted to fill the entire screen, we can do that. And as you can see, it looks really good as well. So even though I'm filling the entire screen, which is technically 1080 by 1920, okay, we're able to use a 512 by 512 image to fill that entire screen and have it look decent, okay? So obviously there's some things that don't look great. The background looks a little poopy in areas. You can see like there's some banding a little bit in here, and that's kind of just because this background is more of like a what is that, like a kind of like a fade, like a little bit of a, I don't know, cloud style background. But you can go through and you can tweak things inside of the window frame, inside of the border. So maybe if I got this a little bit higher up here, closer to the actual border itself, I might get a little bit better on the top. So yeah, the top looks a little bit better. The problem is we're always going to have the issues here on the sides, and that's just due to the fact that that there's problems with with our little edges here. Now, I could export these edges at themselves, okay, as a separate piece. And if I exported these edges at a separate piece, then I could cut this a little bit differently and you wouldn't have that banding on the sides. But in my opinion, you're always going to have kind of like text on the screen and stuff, and like especially it's going to be very rare for this window to take up the entire screen. So it's more commonly going to be, you know, something around like this size. And at that point, it's really hard to even see that background like that. I mean, if we look at it, you can see the banding in there, but it's really hard to see. So I'm not too worried about it personally. But we can, yeah, I can definitely try to take it back as far as I can, which would be about right there. That's going to give us the best possible. But yeah, again, I think this looks pretty good. And one of my goals for this app was to make it be able to run on a lot of different devices. So having small images that I can slice and scale and fill the center of like this is just going to make that a lot easier to do. So cool. So now we have kind of the frame. Okay. So the secondary thing that we need to do, if we go back to our Photoshop image here, is we need this, what is this? This like kind of upper layer here. Okay. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make sure that that also looks good inside of our app. So we can play around with that. So let's create, well, I guess we can just use this image again. So I'm just going to nuke that. Oh, wait, I can't nuke that until I draw some. All right, so let's figure out where that's at. So that's the heading. Okay, let's go inside the heading. And close button, sure. Label. Okay, so there's that upper label. So yeah, so now the question is, do we want that upper label to also be a separate component, or do we want that all of that to be just one component by itself? So let's turn off the text, because we definitely don't want that. So the question is, now if I turn this box off, so this is effectively what we need to export out. Now, the question is whether or not these two things would always scale accordingly, or if this would scale based on like the text that's in it, for example. I'm thinking at this moment that I'm going to keep these two pieces as one, which I think is going to make it a little bit easier for me going down the road. So I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to drag my heading into that. Did I not? Oh, it did. so now we don't need this anymore. Okay, so where's my heading at? Yeah. Oh, okay, it's up there. I was like, where'd it go? Okay, so so the same concepts that we used before, we can use here as well. So now, the one concept that we can't do, unfortunately, is scale it vertically. So that's just kind of based on the way that this image is set up, okay? So there's no real option. Those are still smart images, right? Yep, okay. So I don't need these. I'm just going to delete all this stuff that I don't need in here just because it's getting annoying. I'm trying to keep track of all this. So I don't need that, don't need that. Oh, I need the close button. I do need that. Oh, it's nice. So the close button already has some different states in it, like a hover. Oh, nice. Okay. So yeah, I actually like the hover as the, even though it's not the quote-unquote normal button, that's what I'm going to use. Okay, so just kind of trimming some fat here that I don't care about. Get out here. Okay, so now it's a lot easier to understand what's going on in this image. So, okay, now, like I said before, so I can't really scale this vertically, okay? That's just not an option we have based on the way the art is, and that's because of these nice little, whatever you want to call them, this nice little graphic inside of each of these, okay? So that really prevents me from scaling it vertically. Now, unless I wanted to do something where, like, when I scaled it vertically, these lines, like, stretch down in a weird way or something like that. But what I definitely can do, though, is I can scale it horizontally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do kind of the same concept that I did before, and I'm just going to nuke the parts of this that I don't... Well, okay, so first thing we're going to do is we need to figure out what size we need it. I just realized that. So we need to figure out what size we're going to need it in the game first. So the first thing I'm going to do is, not move that. That's not what I wanted. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to somewhat center this, and then I'm just going to crop this to roughly the size that it's going to be. And then I'm going to start exporting it out at different resolutions just to figure out what resolution I want it at. So right now I don't even know what resolution we are. So we're at 400, so let's just make that 512 on the Y since that's our larger. So again, since they're all smart objects still, we can easily scale things, and it's going to scale appropriately. So let's save this out. Save as. And let's go to PNG. And then let's say this is window. Header. Nice. Okay. So we're going to save that out. We're going to go back to Unity. And we're going to set this up as another sprite. Single. Turn off bitmaps. Hit apply. Both of these are going to be not compressed. Apply. And then RGBA 32-bit. Apply. I really need to write a tool to just set these import settings for me, but you know. Anyways, so, okay, so let's go ahead and let's set up a slice in here. Or a border, sorry, not a slice, a border. Okay, so again, we're only going to scale this horizontally. We're never going to scale this vertically. So we'll set it up like that. We'll go to here, and we can actually repurpose this image we had before. So we can call this image header, and let's switch this to image frame. And then our header, let's turn on, and let's set that to this. Okay. Yeah, so looks great at that, but that's because that's not the way that we want this to be. So let's go to simple first, set native size. Okay. And then let's switch that back to sliced. And then... So you can see what we can do is we can effectively stretch it left and right as far as we want. And we don't have to worry about it having an issue with it looking right. Now, the problem we have right now is that when we look at this, it's not going to match vertically how large we need it to be. As you can see, it's really small. So if our image was smaller, so something along the lines, shoot, that's not what we want, just the frame. There we go. So if our frame was smaller, maybe something along the lines of like this big, then maybe the header wouldn't look so bad in terms of proportions. But the issue that we have is that we want our frame to be able to be huge. Also, this is tiny. We're never going to be able to read that. So what we need to do is we need to make this image much, much larger in order for it to look right. And that's an unfortunate part, is this image is going to be huge. And that's just because this image has a lot of detail in it, which makes it a lot harder to slice. But that's okay. So it's okay to have some large images. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep bumping the image size on this up. Ooh, maybe. Swing and a miss. Okay, that's not at all what I wanted. There we go. And then we're going to keep bumping this image up until it's big enough that it fits a kind of as large as we would want it to be. So now we're jumping all the way up to 2048 by 2048. So much, much larger. So let's export this out or save this as PNG. Okay, so we have our frame header. And then let's go back to Unity. Okay, so, well, that's not what I wanted. Swing and miss. Okay, so now we need to reset up our borders since our image size changed. Really wish they did relative borders. Maybe they do somewhere. Do I see it a way to... Huh, I don't know. Well, edit outline. I don't know what edit outline is. I don't know. Anyways, so back to here. All right, something like that looks nice. Sure. What do we have on here? So let's just go like 800 on each. Looks good. All right, so let's apply that. And let's go back to this image. Okay, so now we can see, well, not there, so we can see over here that this image is a little bit easier to scale now. So if we set it, so let's set it back to simple, let's set it to native size. So this is the native size that it would look good at, if that makes sense. So anytime we scale it lower than that, it should look great. But do we actually need it to be that size? That's the question. Probably not, because if we set it again, native size, so again, that's the size it looks the best at, it's probably even a little bit bigger than our screen even is total. Meaning that we're probably never going to actually have it at that size. So if we go back to our frame now, let's make our frame a little bit bigger. Say it's about this big. I would say that most likely the largest that we're ever going to have something on the screen using this frame would probably be something like this. Again, that's hard to know, but it's good to at least theorize that. And then something like this. So by doing this, this wouldn't really save us anything because of the fact that we're not actually using the slicing, if that makes sense. Because our image is, does it say? It tells me the image size somewhere. It should. Or not the image size, but the, doesn't actually tell me how big the image is. Oh, okay. So yeah, so this image itself is 5.2 megs, which is huge. So what we want to do is we want to get a similar looking effect here without this image being 5.2 megs. So I think that we can obviously trim this to make it a little bit smaller and not as big. So first thing we got to do is if we switch this back to sliced, we can see, okay, so as a sliced image, the problem we would have at an image this large is it'd be really hard to go smaller than about this big of a box. So, but we could go as wide, well, until I drag it off the screen, but we could go as wide as we want and it would still look good. Now, I think, again, that it's a little bit maybe too big. I'm trying to think if it's too big or not. This is something I need to debate at this point in terms of the X. Because I can scale it down a little bit until it starts looking bad. Sorry, I'm just tweaking some stuff. Okay, I think we can probably go a little bit smaller. So let's try dropping it down to, okay, damn it. Keeps wanting me to do that. So let's try dropping it down to 1024 as our width. And then let's save that out. So again, it's a lot of, this is a lot of kind of tedious, like, oh, export this out. See what if it looks good. Export this out. See if it looks good. And that's probably just because I'm not that skilled as, you know, an artist or whatever. But, okay, so now we just need to go back to the header. And switch this again since we changed the size. Oop, that's not at all what I want. So let's go like that. And then let's go something like this. So we can go like 375 on each side. Okay. And let's see if it looks good. So now, if we go back to the image header, then okay. So this would be roughly how large it would be if I did it at its native size. Now, so just because this is its native size, I was just using that as kind of a reference point. Usually you can go a little bit larger than the native size and scale it, and it won't look too bad. So, so again, so this is the native size, which I think is a little bit too small, but I can scale it a little bit, and we can see what it would look like being scaled up a little. So, wait, simple. So we can see if I scale it up. See, it looks like we still have a little bit of room to play in there if I just did it that way and not sliced itself. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to keep it at somewhere in between 1024 and 2048, and I'm just going to cut it now to make it a little bit smaller. So, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit larger. So let's go something like 1500. I think that'll be a nice, well, yeah, 1500. I think that'll be a nice little middle ground. And then I can take these and I can merge those into one layer, and then I can maybe okay. Oh, swing and a miss. Okay, so that looks good. Oh wow. Alright, we'll see. We'll see how that looks. Okay, so then we're going to crop it so that way it's as small as it can be. Okay, and they'll save this out. Let's go PNG, header. Okay, oops. Alright, so now let's go back to our header and let's switch this to actually represent as small as it can be. Okay, so now if we go back to our image, and then I should be able to set this to sliced. Cool. So now I can scale this, and it should look fairly good no matter what size the frame is. So yeah, so it's like we could have a small one, we could make this a little bit smaller, and then this should be able to just scale like this and look good. Okay, cool. So so now we just need to so now that we have like our header and our whatever we want to call this, our other thing that's not the header, the frame set up, now we can go ahead and set up the prefab, so that way we could just spawn this and scale this, and it would look good. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to bring in the fonts that came with this and play around and see if any of those are good and that we might want to use. So let's go back to desktop. Cleric fonts. Oh wait, these are all zips. Let's unzip these. Extract here. Okay, let's grab all these fonts. Okay, and let's drag those into here. Okay, and now all these fonts should be inside of here, which is great. Cool, and they all seem to import fine. So now we can go up into here, and we can actually start building this prefab. So let's create an empty child. Let's call this our root. We can just call this our UI window. Boom, want to call it UI window? Probably UI window. I like that, UI window. Okay. So now these things would go inside of our UI window. So let's make our UI window take up, whatever, this much of the screen for starts. And then now we can start positioning this stuff in here. So now we have our this. And we have our frame. Just going to take a, like this down here. It's like, what do I like better? Do I like it like that or zoomed up? I think I like it up a little bit. Okay, cool. So now, yay, now we have our little window. Yay. Okay, so now we need to focus on setting up these things so that way they work correctly. So this, we don't want to stretch up and down. We only want to stretch left and right. And we want it to be anchored to the top. So I think that's what we need to do. So that way now when I move this, nope, swing and a miss. That's not what we wanted to do. Oh, shoot. I think this frame. Nope, that's, again, swing and a miss. I think this needs to be a child of the frame. Then when I move this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now what you can see I can do is I can take this window and I can put it wherever I want. Well, except for the fact that it's not scaling horizontally or vertically for some reason. Well, it's scaling horizontally. Well, let's figure out why it's not scaling vertically. So those are the opposite of what they should be. So let's go back. Let's go back. Reverse. Okay, so this one, the frame should be that, and the header should be this. Now I wonder if this actually would work without me. Okay, cool. So yeah, so now the nice thing is I can now spawn a window wherever I want, and the entire window can just be perfectly scaled to whatever I want. So, and it's all being based on some smaller images, which is nice. So those images originally, what was it, 5? I think it was like 5 megs for it to look right. So now I dropped it down to 1.8 megs, which is much smaller than the 5.6 it was before. So that's good. And then the same thing, this is tiny, this is 0.6. So having a full screen graphic that's only 0.6 is actually really, really, really cheap. So that's great. And then we have other things like this X button up here that we can export out now separately if we wanted. Whatever, we can deal with it. So, so I think the next thing we want to do is let's start saving these as actual kind of prefabs. So buttons, button level template. Nice. Okay, so we want folder, and I'm going to call this Windows. Or, yeah, I don't know if we're going to have 2 different types of windows. So I'm probably just going to go UI. And then I'm going to start putting these new components in here. So let's call this UI window. So it goes in here, UI window. Cool. So now the next thing we need is we need to set up a button. Or we need to get a button image. So we kind of got to just do that same process that we did before. So again, it should be super easy. We just need to go back to... Let's see here. Okay, so that one doesn't have an image in it. So let's go back to the PSD files or a button image in it. So that was the first one. Does this have a button? Yeah, so here's one type of button. Oh, I guess they have 2 different type of buttons. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of this type of button here. I actually just kind of like the generic button over here much better. So I think I'm just going to grab that one instead. So let's go File, New. So let's go, I don't know, say 512 by 512. Let's just make a 512 by 512 button. So again, so before I was kind of showing how to do something sliced and make it good. Now, I'm not necessarily going to need to do that for everything. I might not even need to do it for the window. I might go back and just grab like a 2048 by 2048 window and just say screw it. But I wanted to go over that just in case anybody was curious on how to do that. So, so next thing I want to do though is I want to figure out where the heck this button lives. Okay, it doesn't live in that. It was in here. Okay, and then button. All right, that sounds good. This button up here. Now, of course, probably like impossible to find. And then let's grab our button and let's fill this. Oops. Interesting. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Don't crop, please. Thank you. All right, so we got our button, and now I just want to crop this to the size of the button. Okay, and then delete this background, and then go into our button. So, okay, so it looks like it's just doing like pretty much a color tint anyways. So again, I like the hover the best, so I'm just gonna grab these two things, move it out here, nuke everything else, and then now I can then take this and export this out. So let's see, what was our size? So again, I can scale this to whatever size. We're doing 512. So file, save as. So this is what you would do if you were not trying to make it sliced. You would just set it to whatever you think your max size of a button is ever going to be. And then, see here, go back to Unity. And then now we can just create a button. So UI button. And then on our button, we can set this new image that we just brought in. Oh, put it in there. I need to create a new folder. Call this button. And put our UI button in there. And then that would be UI button background. Yeah, I guess we can just go background. That's fine. All right, so now we need to set this to sprite and single and import. And again, we just want to set everything to be uncompressed. Oh, that's 24-bit. We want 32-bit. Okay. All right, that looks good. And again, we don't need to set up the border on this because it doesn't actually matter what the border is set to. So let's go text, or sorry, button, and then let's drag this into here. And yay, now we have a button. So what's cool is as long as this button isn't like ginormous, so as you can see, if I make it ginormous on the screen, it looks terrible. Like it's super blurry. Doesn't look good at all. Now, if I would go back into Photoshop, and let's say I would say, I don't know, that's not what I wanted, that's what I wanted. Let's say I make it 2048 by whatever. So make it huge now, and then I hit save. Bum, ba, bum. Oh, yeah, because I'm in window button. That's what I want. Save. So replace that. So now when we go back in Unity, you can see, maybe, 2048 by 2048. Did that not save? Interesting. Oh, there we go. Now it updated. Okay, so now if I go to my button, and let's just set native size. Okay, so you can see the button looks a lot less crappy. Yeah, so that's, I mean, those are things you can do. But now the problem with that is our button is huge. It's like 4 megs for our button size. So that's where doing something that's like sliced is much nicer, because you can have something really, really small that will look a lot better because you can effectively mathematically fill it in, if that makes sense. So anyways, so the cool thing about this, again, is that we can do a bunch of different stuff. But the main thing that I'm probably going to do is just kind of keep this button, because right now we only have one. So I just want to go through and update all the buttons. So let's see, let's go back to Photoshop and let's look through these and let's see if there's any other buttons that maybe look better or look different that we might want to use instead. So we have like this kind of very generic button, which I just threw in right there. We have this kind of tab button that looks a little bit nicer. So let's, where's that at? So that's under, that'd be in this. So that's the tabs. So that's 4 tabs, but that's not what I wanted. So that's, okay, so that's in here. Button regular, nope, that's button regular. Tabs, there we go. I'm just kind of curious of what these tabs look like individually. So active, okay, so let's grab this tab, and let's go back here, and let's just drag that onto there. Okay, so those tabs are literally set up for tabs. See how they have that darkening on the top? So that's not going to work for us in terms of a different button. But we might want this kind of fancier button here. So let's go ahead and let's grab one of those, which should be in here somewhere. Button regular, I'm guessing. Okay, so yeah, that's this one, no problem. So now let's grab this button regular. Let's throw this over here. And why am I on? Don't crop. There we go. So now let's scale this to fit this as well. So this is a much fancier looking button. So maybe we'll actually use this button. I kind of like it now that I've looked at it again. But anyways, so we can nuke our old button that we have in here. We might be able to crop a little bit more out of here too, which is nice. Just to give us a little bit less. So again, we could try to, you know, make this sliceable, but again, I'm not really worried about that at this moment. At this moment, I kind of just want to see what these buttons look like. A lot of this is get it in the game, see what it looks like, and then come back to it later with more, with kind of more, with another level of polish or another pass on it. So let's go file, save as, PNG, background. So this would be, let's call this UI button, UI button fancy, sure. Cool. Okay, it's taking a while to save because it's a big image. Let's go back to Unity. It's going to take a second to import that. Now we got our fancy button. Let's make that a sprite, single. Nope. Yep. Apply. 32-bit apply. Okay. All right. So now we can see we have button. Let's dupe that. Let's call this button fancy. And then let's set this image to our fancy. Okay, so yeah, so you can see that's so our button fancy kind of looks like, which I guess now looking at it, it does look a little bit better. So we should be able to scale this however we want. Doesn't really matter. We can make it bigger, smaller, do whatever we want. Cool. So so now at this point, let's go through and start replacing some of our images. One of the other thing we should try to grab, we should find just a global background to use. So I don't know if this is what's the background this is using. Oh, okay, so that's like an actual background. Let's go back here. I think the first one had like an actual background. It does. It's cool. This kind of like purpley sky, whatever thing. Cool. So let's let's export this and make it awesome. So file. I have no idea what size these images are. 1920 by 1080. Okay, that works for me. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take this. I'm going to make a new image, and because I'm assuming that's just a raw image. So let's go 1920 by 1080. Actually 1080. So I forgot we're working in vertical or portrait mode, so we want 1080 by 1920. Okay, and then let's go here. Start that here. Let's rotate this bad boy. And ta-da! Now we have a background. Yay! So we can either do it that way or this way. I kind of liked it that way better. Cool. Looks good. So, because I'm pretty sure that's not, that's just like a static or a raster image. So, so let's save that out. File save as. Let's just go UI. Let's just call this, let's see here, global background. Global BG. I'm calling everything BG. So, and then actually let's go BG underscore global. Let's make that a PNG, and then let's make a new folder. Let's folder BG, and then BG global. Save. Okay. All right, so now let's go back into Unity, and now the nice thing is we can say all of our backgrounds can now, or all of our menu or UI screens can have a background. Are you gonna save anytime soon? Or there we go. Don't have to be a jerk about it. Okay, so now we can add a UI image. Let's say image underscore background. That was button fancy. There we go. And then our new background image. So again, set to a sprite, single. And then cool. So let's make this uncompressed again. Maybe one of these days. RGBA 32-bit. RGBA 32-bit. Boom. All right, and then now that we set that, we can set our image. And then let's just set this to stretch and fill the background. Yay, now we have a background. It's not just white and boring. Woot, 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 woot. Okay, cool. So now, so let's see here. Let's go back to that Photoshop stuff. Let's look at how. Is there anything being done in here text-wise on a button? Nope. What about in this one? Okay, so it looks like they're just using like a kind of like a yellowish, whitish color for that for the text. But we can go to one of these buttons. Okay, so here's our color. Okay, so what is that? Set to. We can copy that maybe. I don't know if we can copy that or not. I forget what Unity does for colors, but. Let's grab the font on these buttons. Let's go to our button fancy and let's best fit that for now. Let's set the color to sweet. I can just copy paste that. That is awesome. Oh, damn it. That's not what I wanted. All right, so I'm just going to set that as a preset so we can set that across the board. And then I'm going to try around some of the different fonts that come in this. So first thing I want to do is best fit, but best fit can be much larger than this. Let's go 100, I don't care. So yeah, so we can look at some of the different fonts that came with this UI kit and see if any of these look good or not. So, all right, so let's see here. So that doesn't look too bad just for as a generic button. So those are just italic. Oh, some of those look ridiculous. So that's like Arial, your built-in one, which we obviously don't want to use. I would say probably this one looks good. And that one looks good. I like that. So let's just go with that. What is that? The Crimson Text Semi-Bold. The old Crimson Text Semi-Bold. All right, and then we want this same text to be down here. Do that. Just rename this text. Okay, and then set that to 0. Oh, maybe. 0. These should all be 1. I don't know why they're not. Okay, cool. So now we got two kind of generic-y looking buttons that we can do. And now if we hit play, that's going to probably break due to our editor tool. So we need to go to our editor tool and tell it to not do what we're trying to do. So what we want to do is we want to add this scene as well to the ignore. So we're already checking to see if we're not in main and we're not in puzzle generation. So we just want to add and our current active scene is not. We call this UI sandbox. Okay. So that way, what's nice is when I hit play in here, it should just keep me in the scene versus flipping me out of it, which would be bad. So let's hit play. Cool. So now you can see I can click these buttons and they act like buttons. Yay. So, so one of the reasons why you might want to do a sprite swap, especially for this fancier button down here, is you see how the whole button tints? So we might want to make it so that way only this inner part changes when you click on it versus the whole frame. But, you know, again, that's kind of like a level of polish that I'm going to put on way at the end, not right now. But what we can do is we can go into our menu at least. And we can start using, oh shoot, I don't think I made a fancy button prefab. Well, getting a little ahead of myself here. I think I need to make a prefab out of that yet. Button level template. Yep. So I need to make prefabs out of our button fancy and our regular button. I'm actually going to rename them. I'll call that button generic. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So now if I go back to menu, now we should be able to kind of start doing some stuff. So UI. Oh, okay, we don't have the background either, so okay, another prefab that needs made. It's for this image background, which of course we don't have a background in here yet. So I'll create a folder for background, image background. Okay, and then so now let's save that. Let's go back to our menu scene. So again, what we want to do is we want to replace these buttons with the buttons that we created there before. So we go back into here. So we want to use our image background. So we should be able to just drag that in here. Boom. So now we got that nice little background. Cool. It actually already looks a lot better just having something other than just a generic white background. But what we want to do is we want to go every place where we're using button. So we have a lot of buttons. Okay. And all these buttons and what? Oh, that's because that's a layout. We should be able to then to use, let's try our button fancy. So yeah, so they're all tinted, so we want to switch the tints to all be white. Okay, and then all right, cool, that looks good already. And then we want all of our text that we were using on all of those buttons, so text, which would be all of these maybe. I don't know what these text titles are under, but oh yeah, whatever, we can just update all the text into the semi-bold. Semi-bold, and then let's set the color of all these to that color I saved before. So yeah, boom, that looks nice. Okay, so now after I changed all that stuff, so these buttons, so again, so these are probably cases where we don't want play through this and see if these buttons work the way they should. So cool. So now we have our options. Use the fancy button. So probably on back and mute and maybe even, well, reset all data. Again, these are just because the scale on these is not correct. But as you can see, it's already starting to kind of come alive a little bit more in the way it works. But the nice thing is we can just go through and set these things without having to actually do much work once the art for them is created and set in the game. So these look really good already. But if we go into options, you can see we have some issues there. So let's go into the options screen and let's tweak some of those things to make those look better. Okay, so we have options. So now in here, what do we want to do? We want to, I think we want to use instead of the fancy background, we probably should just use the generic one in these cases. Oh, and that should be called button generic. Man, I'm just failing with naming. Generic button background. Okay, so let's go back in here. Let's grab those three, and then we can probably set those to generic background. Okay, so those look a little bit better, but they still need to be scaled a little bit more appropriately. So anyway, so I got a question in the chat. Was that Rostiel? I guess I'm not quite sure how to say your name, my good sir. But anyways, so this game is going to be a mobile, so iOS, Android, puzzle game that involves cubes and stuff. So this is actually the 9th time that I've streamed the making of this game. So feel free to check out my YouTube channel, which is, you can see it on the bottom. It's just Andrew on Tech. It's pretty simple to find. But if you go to my making a game playlist, you can go back and look at the or watch the previous 9 streams. Or wait, this is stream number 9. The previous 8 streams. There we go. But effectively, I can kind of give you a quick rundown here. It's pretty easy to kind of go over. So let me save this real quick and then turn off the options menu. But anyways, yeah, if you go back to the first stream, you're definitely going to be able to get a really good overview of what the game's going to be. I talk about design a lot in that one. But to kind of give a quick overview. So effectively, this is a game where you have cubes, okay? So you have a set of input cubes, which you control, and then you have a set of guide cubes, which are going to be there as soon as you start the game, as you can see. So the way it works is the whole goal is you have to get your input cube to, or cubes, plural, because there's going to be more at later levels, to match your guide cube, okay? So the whole core mechanic of having anywhere between 1 and 6 cubes on the screen, okay, it's already... So okay, nice to meet you, Ray. Sorry, I got totally distracted there for a second. Anyways, so to you can either have anywhere between 1 and 6 cubes on the screen at a time, okay? And then there's different rules per level that you're on that can be in effect. So, for example, as you can see right away, when I click a cube, it cycles between colors, okay? So it cycles between red, green, and then blue, okay? So you can see red, green, blue, red, green, blue. Okay, so that's kind of the normal cycle rule, okay? Then there's also a rule later on in the game where the colors cycle between red, green, and blue, and then back to green and back to red. So it's like an alternating cycle, okay, or a ping pong effect. So that's like one example of one rule. Another rule that you can have is you can have cube locking. So that allows you to take one of these cubes and you can say, hey, keep this cube at this color while I switch to other cubes. Now, the reason that's relevant is anytime you switch a cube or anytime a cube is switched, every other cube that's not gray, okay, so that has been activated, will also change colors. So notice when I start changing this one, the one on the left is also cycling, okay? So there's two different rules around that. One rule is that every other cube cycles, and another rule is only cubes touching horizontally or vertically cycle, okay? So obviously with two, it doesn't really make sense for that. So it's kind of hard to explain. But if you get to more levels, I guess I can open up the tool that I use to actually generate these. Puzzle generation. And then in here's a little bit better example. So I can talk about the different. So anywhere between 1 cube to 2 cubes, 4 cubes, or 6 cubes. So those are the different amounts of cubes that can be on the screen. And then while you're doing that, so again, remember I was talking about they're all cycling. Okay, so see how no matter which one I click on, they're all cycling. Now, there's different rules around that. So there can also be the vertical and horizontal adjacent cycle I was talking about. So notice now, only the ones that are vertically and horizontally adjacent are cycling. Okay, so that could be another rule that's in effect. And then also you have things like I was talking before, like cube locking. So cube locking allows you to take a cube. So remember it was green before I marked it black. Okay, so it's green. And then even though it should be cycling, when I unlock it, it's still green. Okay, so there's certain game types or certain puzzles where you can lock one of the cubes at will. Now there's also called forced cube locking, which forces you to have at least one cube locked at all times, and you can't toggle it off. All you can do is switch which cube it's locked. Okay, so that's another type of rule. And then so pretty much each level is going to be a combination of 1 to 6 cubes, and then a combination of those 3 rules that I talked about. And effectively, yeah, you just want to be able to go from level 1 to level 100 and get 3 stars or 3 gems or whatever we're going to do on all 3 of them. So pretty much almost all of the programming for the game has already been completed up to this point. At this point, what we're working on is I had the audience vote for an art pack that they wanted me to use. So I just linked a bunch of them on the Unity Asset Store. So this Cleric one that I'm using right now was what was picked. So what I'm doing at this point is just going through the app that's already pretty much fully functional and going through and adding in the art from that Cleric UI pack. So hopefully that explains kind of what I'm doing there, Ray. If you have any more questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Anyways, so where were we at? Oh yeah, our UI menu was looking kind of, or our options menu was looking kind of crappy, and that's because of all these buttons. So we're using the generic button up here, which is fine and dandy, except for the fact that when you squish it, oh, that's just the text field, I think. Well, actually, I have no idea what I'm even selecting. Back button. So yeah, so it looks kind of crappy with the button scaled like that. So we either want to use a different button, okay, which we could do, or a different button background, or we could change the way that our button looks. So let's see here. If I scale it down a little bit, yeah, it still looks kind of crappy. So I wonder what our other button looks like if it's scaled lower. So we can try our fancy background. So that looks kind of crappy again as well. So all these look kind of poopy, unless I make them smaller, like this, and then it doesn't look so bad. But what about our generic button? Does that look better too? Okay, so that looks better too. So what I'm going to do, is that not set to scale with me? Oh, it is. Okay, so I just want to make this a little bit smaller. So let's make it fit inside the actual area that we care about here. Okay, so then let's make the font a little bit smaller. Huh, it actually looks... There we go. Okay, so that looks good. So now our back button looks a little bit better, so now we should be able to apply the same logic to our mute buttons. So those I think we just need to widen out a little bit. So let's grab our, let's see here, so music, sound effects, button mute. I think if we just widen those out a little bit, that'll look a lot better. And then grab the text. Let's do the same thing for each of these. I'm going to do these individually, unfortunately. So yeah, thanks Ray for thinking it's pretty interesting. It was funny so the very first stream, I went into it and the only idea that I had was that I wanted to do something with cubes. That was literally my entire idea. I wanted it to be something that I could do fairly quickly. I wanted it to do something with cubes, and I wanted to publish it to mobile just so that way I could put it in the Android and iOS store, and all the people that watched me make it could actually go there and download it and play it for free. So I thought that, excuse me, as I'm losing my voice apparently. I thought that was kind of a cool idea, the whole mobile, that way, you know, the people watching can actually play it when it's done, which is kind of cool. But the only idea I really had was cubes, and that I wanted it to be a puzzle game and something fairly simple. And then pretty much going back and forth between chat and just kind of things that were popping up as I was prototyping in that first stream, that's where kind of the idea was born. So if you go back and watch the first stream, you can definitely see like how the idea was born, which is pretty interesting just in the fact that it shows like... What was cool is there was actual like audience participation, so you know it wasn't just me creating the idea. It was a collaborative effort between me and the crowd, or whatever you want to say, which was pretty cool in my opinion. So, anyways, so let's go back and let's fix that title. Let's fix this title. Bloop. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Except I'm gonna move both of these like this. Okay, so it looks better. I could also do oh yeah, that looks a little bit better. I like that. So yeah, I'm just kind of adding a couple layers of polish on all these things, just make it look a little bit better. And then I think green. What does it look like if we switch this from green? Maybe if we switch this from green to that blue color. Ooh. Hitting the blue hard. So now, I don't know why it's showing up in your recommendations there, Lewis, but I'm glad I'm glad you're watching. What's funny is this is probably the most boring aspect so far on any of the streams. I don't know. There's been some boring parts, but this is fairly boring at this point, just because the actual functionality of the app is pretty much done. So there's not much programming to be done at this point. Really all I'm doing is going through and updating all the UI to actually like use actual art versus it using like the temporary art that I was using before. So yeah, so hopefully this is somewhat interesting, but if you want something that's much more interesting, I definitely recommend going back and watching the previous streams. Those were by far much more interesting. So, but anyways, let's get this button going here, and then we can switch this button to, what was I doing? Oh yeah, preserve aspect. Just want this to be like a ginormous button down here for resetting all your data. And see, the only problem we have with this art pack is like I'm not gonna be able to like tint these worth of crap. Due to the fact that they're not like gray boxed or not, you know, gray inherently. So anyways, but I think this looks, I mean, it still doesn't look great. And you know, especially, I don't know, these mute buttons and the back button don't look amazing. But again, I wanted to just kind of go through and just make them so they don't look terrible. And then do another pass where I go through and actually tweak some stuff. The main point of this was to get kind of a feeling of what this UI pack is going to feel like. So that way, to kind of get a feeling of what this UI pack is going to feel like. So that way I can go through and get a better sense of the other things that I need to update later on. So Let's turn that off. Let's turn back on the main menu. So yeah, so let's save that. And yeah, so now if we play through this, we can go play game. Oh yeah, so that back button is, but this, okay, this looks a little bit better. I mean, again, it doesn't look like the best thing in the world, and it's mainly just this back button, this mute button. I think I'm going to have it's some type of header up here, so it's not just kind of like floating in space, especially since we have that nice window that we already created. So, for example, if we go to play game, that's a good example of where that window would look really good, I think, is effectively containing these things here. So let's go and add that window there. Select game. So remember, we have nothing in there, and that's just because those things are generated at runtime inside of here. But we can grab one and throw it in here and then kind of get what they're going to look like. So let's just generate a bunch of these. Boop, boop, boop. Cool. And then we'll just delete those later. But we can then also go in here and let's go to our UI window. Let's drop that in there. And then if we take this UI window and then scale it. Okay. So we need to make our, I think I can make this smaller without freaking out too much. Okay, hold on. I just want to make it smaller this way. Okay, so let's make it probably about... Alright, so that looks like pretty good in terms of how wide I want it. So now I need to update my layout so that way the sizing makes it good. So that way 5 of those actually fit in here. Yay. So what's that? It's probably like 330. Let's go 330. Okay. And then that's looks good. Then I can move it up. Move it up a little bit. Maybe. That's what I want. Thank you. So that way it goes like that, and then I can move this down. Oh, actually, that can stay. Well, yeah, actually, we probably should move this down a little bit. Just give us some little more space. Cool. So yeah, so now we actually got some type of window thing going on here. So now we could probably actually, now I think about this, this could probably replace. All right, so it's okay. So I'm actually going with a little bit of a different theme here. So I think this is going to look a lot better than it was looking before. So let's throw our back button down here at the bottom. Let's put it like there, and then actually let's go even farther back like that. There we go. And let's take our UI window. Let's make it match like that, and then we have button back. Alright, so let's go with our title. So now, okay, so now we can start doing some more interesting stuff. So our title can go into our header here, and then that way it scales appropriately to that. Zoom in here. So we want it to fill apparently about this. Oh, nope, swing and a miss. About this space right here. Cool. And then now it's filling that space. Then let's set it to. And then yeah, let's try a different color. Maybe just white looks good. Maybe a darker blue. I think white looks good. But this is also going to be maybe a different font too. Might look better in here. Since it's kind of like a title. Ooh. I think we can go with just like bold. Bold looks pretty good. Okay, so select game. Oh, I guess we have the double title. I wonder if we want to put something up here. Oh yeah, so maybe this actually would live up here in this header title. Alright, so let's throw this up here in this header title. So obviously the font's too big now, so let's... Okay, so that looks a little bit better. And then what we can do is we can put some other information in there. So that's like title, and we can have like info maybe, like info, and then the info can go down here. Info could be like telling you what to do, so info could be like please select level. Actually, we can just go please select the level that you would like to play. Sure, that looks good. Cool. And then all right, so that looks kind of good. Material something, I don't know. Cool, so I'm going to save that. So, so now, obviously we need to update these buttons, which we're going to do here soon. But I think, though, that looks a lot better already. So I think what we're, I don't know if the generic button, that square button, is going to look very good on those. So let's go to one of those, let's see here, those template buttons. So if I switch that to the generic button background, yeah, see, that looks pretty crappy. So I think we're going to need a different, something that's more square. So let's go back to those Photoshop files, and let's try to find something more square that we could use as a button background for these. That number one, and then number two, what am I using for this font? Oh, Arial for all those new gross. So let's change the font here to, I don't know, something. I think that kind of fits. That fits pretty nicely. So if I change that, hit apply. Yay, so now they all have that font. Cool. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's go back to the Photoshop files that we had before, and let's try to find a button that would work better for, let's see here, for like a squared kind of button thing. I mean, we can do something like this where we just use like this grid. I think that's like a whole grid though. I don't know how that is set up. So that's, okay, so that's those items. Okay, so it's definitely in the items slots. Is that actual, oh my gosh, is that individual slots? Each one of those images is, oh my goodness. Okay, well, the good news is we can probably use those slots as our whatever, our image background for those buttons. What's ridiculous is that there's so many of them, but anyways, so let's go back here. Let's nuke this. I'm just using this temporary image. This is pretty friggin' simple, so let's just make the canvas size image canvas size. Let's make that, this shouldn't have to be very big, so we could probably do at least 256 by 256, if not smaller, but let's just do 256 by 256 for now. And let's grab this. Okay, and then that's not just, is that just a literally alpha'd timeout? Oh, okay, there is a border. Okay, you just can't see it very well, I think. Okay, so file, save as, and then let's go to PNG, texture UI. What are we calling this? I guess this would be should be UI button, item button, or what am I calling those? Let's go back to Unity and see what I'm calling those. I am calling those button level templates. Button level. So let's go back here. We can call this UI button level background. Oop. right. Cool. So let's save that. Let's go into here. All right, so layout. All right, so here. All right, we got a bunch of stuff randomly open here. Let's go to UI button level. And let's set this to sprite and single. And offers transparency. Cool. Hit apply. 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 And then I should be able to set this here. Boom. Okay. And why does this look like a turd? Alright, I'm clearly missing something, because that does not look like it looked in Unity, or in Photoshop. Alright, what am I missing here? Because that does look pretty much just like a black thing, but in here it looks like it has like that outline to it. So, which one is this one? Okay, so slot 9. Yeah. Oh, okay. I think it's just, so there. It does seem to have an outline on it, but for some reason in Unity that outline is not very visible, which is weird. Huh, interesting. So, I could obviously tint it something, maybe? No, not even. Okay, so it looks like that's not really what I want to do. So what if I just set this to back to nothing, and then just set it to like 50% transparency, and then set the text color to white. All right, that looks a little bit better. Okay, so it looks like we don't actually need that button level background that is part of it. I was gonna say, when I saw that image, it didn't look like we needed that. So, all right, so now let's go back into here, and let's tweak this a little bit. I think it needs to be a little bit less even. Look good, maybe around like 15. 15 is, I think, a little more. So let's go with like, let's try 25. All right, that looks kind of cool. Okay, so let's see here. So what else do we need? So first of all, this layout here can be much larger now, which is nice. So this can, because this can go all the way up to there and all the way down to like here. So we're just gonna do it like that, and then we can use our UI window, manipulate that like that. Boom. And then that looks pretty good. And then our back button can just be moved up a little bit. Cool. All right. So now let's play and see what this looks like. So let's delete that. Let's hit save, and then let's turn this off. Let's go back to our main menu. Let's play. Cool. Looks kind of fun. Oh, so our scroll list is messed up, but other than that, things look good. Just need to make it so I can't go past the scroll list there. I think that's because my content size is too large, but let's figure that out. So let's see here. Scroll rect layout. Oh yeah, my content size is just too large. Oh yeah, I made them smaller. I forgot. Since I made my grid smaller, I need to make this smaller. So this would need to be roughly what size? Maybe even a little bit smaller. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so this needs to be like this. So, okay. So copy component, and let's go back into that. Alright, so now let's see if it scrolls correctly, which I'm assuming it will. Yay. 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 Okay, so now, alright, so the next thing we need to find something to represent stars for us. Whether that be, I think I saw in the preview images, there was there was like a gem or something, like a little diamond that I think would look kind of cool. So let's go back to the Photoshop files. I think that was in the crafting one, maybe. Was that the crafting one? Oh yeah, so there's these little gems down here. So I think we can use those as our, let's see here, if we go back to our select game. And then let's look at let's try again one of our level template buttons. So yeah, so instead of circles, I think we can use these little gems, and those can kind of be like our stars for the game, which is nice because they already have like a gold one here, so we can probably just use that super easily. So let's see your gems. Let's just create a new, or actually we can probably just use this one again. Boop, boop, boop. So our gems are, maybe, I was trying to drag that. Can I go into here? Thank you. So our gems are probably going to need to be fairly large, just due to the fact that we're going to have them. So A, they can't be sliced, duh. But B, so image, size. So A, they can't be sliced because they're like an actual image like this. And then B, the secondary thing is that on our results screen, we're going to want to have like a fairly large, we want it to take up a good chunk of the screen. So in order for it to take up a good chunk of the screen, we're going to need to make this pretty large. So let's see, like 1024. Oh, wow. Swing and a miss. Image. Size. Gross. All right, so 1024 by 1024. And then now I can scale the crap out of this image, which I don't know if I'll ever need it on screen that large, but hey, sometimes you don't know. Also, I don't really like that stroke on there personally, so I'm just going to turn that off. Okay, so now I can just crop this, make it so it's literally only the size of the gems. Okay, so I know I'm definitely going to need a yellow version and then like a grayed out version. And then possibly a black version too. That's just, let's see here. Because I'm thinking, let's go back here. So we have the white, meaning you haven't got it. I wonder if I can make a white kind of, I could probably just make a mask out of this. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export this. I'm just kind of sorry, I'm running through things in my head of how I want to do this, but let's go. New folder, let's call this gems. And then we have, this is going to be UI underscore gem. And then underscore, so this is a gem earned. Okay. Alright, so now let's go back to Unity. Let's set that up correctly in about 2 seconds because apparently this is still exporting. There we go. Okay. So this needs to be sprite 2D single. And then I'm going to set these. I wish I could set these both at the same time. It's so gross. 32-bit. Okay, hit apply. Alright, sweet. So now let's go back into our button here, and we have our layout stars. So let's use our gem earned. Cool. And then, so if I preserve aspect on that, yeah, that looks a little bit better. Okay. Oh, wow. So what's so funny, I'm probably going to have to export this out in 2 different ones, because as you can see, so anytime you have an image that's like ginormous, so this image is really large because I think I made it like 1024 or whatever, when it scales down lower, it actually gets like this little like white pixel effect on it. I forget what the name for this is, but so for example, if I set this to a much smaller, you can see, I mean, I don't know if you can see on the stream, but it actually smooths out quite a bit on there versus when I had it at 1024, you'll get like these little white specks on the gem itself. Actually, you know what's kind of cool about that is it almost makes the gem look like it's sparkling. Maybe I could actually play that kind of visual artifact into my favor. We'll see. But anyways, so let's set all of these to here. Set all to, okay, so
these don't, what is that? Image, raw image size. So 1024 by 925. Okay. Yeah, I'm just making the gems look a little more uniform, but making them look a little more square. So what I can do is I can just preserve aspect, which is a simple, easy way to do that. Okay, so now apply. So now I'm tinting the color, I believe, based on whether you get it or not currently. So, okay, so that looks, I can definitely do black when it's locked. That actually looks fine. But tinting it, ooh, you know what I could do? I could do transparency when you don't have it earned. So it's like this. Huh, let's see here. So instead of turning it colors, because obviously tinting it yellow is not going to do shit except make it look really stupid. I wonder if like doing like 50% like gray and 50% opacity might look cool. Okay, so let's go into code and let's kind of tweak some of the things we're doing here. So I know we're changing those colors somewhere in the UI for this. All right, so let's search for color because I know I'm setting the color somewhere in here. I'm never setting the color in here. That's interesting. Do these have so is there code on here? There's code on here. Okay. That makes more sense. So I'm guessing I'm setting the color in here somewhere. Gotcha. Okay, so I'm either setting the color to white or yellow based on if you earned it or not. So if you haven't earned it, I set it to white, and if you have earned it, I set it to yellow. So I definitely want to switch that up. So I just want it to be just white, and then if you haven't earned it, I want to set this to new color, and I want this to be, I want to set to 0, 0, 0. Let's see here, 0.5. Let's go with 0.25. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm just changing the opacity lower if you haven't earned it. Okay, and then color.gray. Oh, maybe. So gray if it's unlocked or not. So let's set it to black if it's not unlocked. I might just straight hide them if it's not locked. Like if you can't even attempt it yet. So, but let's go with black and see what that looks like. All right. So now we can. Okay. So we should be able to apply this. Apply, and then we can set this to white. Hit apply. Object name material extracts. Material editor. Huh. That's odd. Oh, don't you love when you're getting errors inside from being generated from Unity components, which is just freaking awful. Okay, so apply that, nuke that, hit save, turn this off. All right, see what this looks like. Let's see what this looks like. Huh. All right, so it seems, so I gained 3 on here, I gained 2 on here. Oh yeah, so that's way too opaque. So black, I think, actually doesn't look bad for showing you that it's locked. But showing you that you haven't earned it, it just, yeah, 0.25 is way too low. So let's try, yeah, let's go 0.5. Let's see what 0.5 looks like. Wow, is that really... Oh, God damn it. That was swing and a miss. All right, so let's go. Let's look at that real quick. Yeah. Okay. So I'm wondering is why this... Oh, it's set to black in 0.5. Interesting. Interesting. Oh, because, wait, that one's unlocked. Huh. Wonder why it's set to black in 0.5. Because it should be set to white in 0.5. Huh. Interesting. So let me go to the code and try to figure out why that's happening. Is that the only place I'm setting color in here? Okay. So, yeah. So if stars.length. Oh, are we... So if it's not... If it's unlocked... Then I either set it to white. Oh, I'm an idiot. I was setting it to black. Okay. That was just me being dumb. I'm dumb, 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 dumb. Gotta know how colors work. Hey, there we go. Okay, so now you can see, okay, so those are dimmed, but I think they need to be dimmed even more, so I think my original 0.25 is probably closer to what I want. Cool. So yeah, I think that's pretty clear that you haven't earned it. So now, like, let's play this level. Then I go back to the menu, and now I have 5, and now I can play this one. I just haven't earned any, and then these are locked. Cool. I think that works. All right, back button. So in options, yeah, I'm gonna put the back button down there like that. I think I'm gonna use that whole same kind of setup that I used in there with the UI window for our options. All right, so let's go and grab that UI window from before. Where the heck did I put that? Resources, that's where I put that. UI window. Okay, let's throw that up here. And then let's throw the title underneath. Oh, you know what I could do? I just realized I could go back into here, UI window, hit apply, and then now I actually have a title inside of here. Cool. So now my title should be options. And our subtitle can be oh, all changes saved automatically. Sure. Okay, cool. And then now, let's see here. So now we just got to scale this stuff to make it actually fit inside this window. So first thing we need to do is we need to scale the window a little bit. So that can be, and then, okay, because what we want is we want our back button to match. So I'm going to go back to fancy. Okay, I'm going to throw this down here. And then, so I want my back button from select game to pretty much be the same. So copy component. So I should be able to just copy the rect transform over, and it should be about the same then. Okay, so that looks good. And then I just need the back inside of it to match. What size did that? So it was 137. 137. It's a very odd number, but you know, just living the dream of 137. Okay, so now this should go like that. Okay, and then back my window. Okay, so now I got way too many things open. Don't know what the heck I'm looking at. All right, so window should be a little bit smaller. Okay, then our reset all data button we can make a little bit smaller. That right there. Actually, we can make that huge if we wanted. It just looks kind of stupid, so I'm guessing the answer is no. And then I'm actually going to restructure, I think, these a little bit. I think I can make this. Let's see here. What I want to do is I want to take this mute button. Alright, let's take mute and let's throw it underneath. And then we can make the slider bigger. And then the mute button can be big too. Ooh, you know what's nice is now that the mute button can be a fancy button. Fancy. Like mute. Like that. Yeah, sure. Something like this. That works. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the text title. Let's move that over a little bit. Let's grab the buttons, put that up here. And then sound effects volume. Cool. Music volume, do the same thing. Button. Turn back into fancy. Let's throw that up here. Let's see here. Let's make our two mute buttons match. So paste component values. Okay, and then same thing for our SFX. Copy component. Paste component values. Cool. And then slider should be easy. Move that all the way over. All right. Cool. So yeah, our menu looks a little boring here, but you know, we can move these up so at least they fit up here better. And then our resettle data can be up here like this. Actually, it can be down here. Okay. Sweet. All right, so let's save that. That's looking a little bit better already. Okay, and then let's turn our main menu back on. Okay, and let's see what this looks like. So play game. So these look good. Then we can hit back, and then we go like options, and we can be like mute, slider, mute, back, options. Ah, okay. So here's our new our new thing that we need to do, and probably going to be the last thing that I do tonight. I have freaking allergies, man. Allergies have been killing me. Pollen's like super high in the area I live in right now. I've just been feeling terrible. So let's get this confirmation window working here, and then we can probably call this for tonight. So let's see here. Okay, so that's based on a prefab. So we got that prefab down here. So let's see here. I think that's under pop-ups, right? Yep, pop-up generic. So let's just throw this up here. title. Cool. So yeah, let's go through and just kind of start updating this. So one thing that we can do is the actual thing itself can use our UI window. So where's our UI window? There we go, UI window. Okay. And then UI window can just be, in this case, alright, so that should fill whatever our pop-up generic fill is, unless that's smaller. Is that smaller? No, that fills our whole thing, right? So pop-up generic, image frame. Ah, okay, so that does not fill. Interesting. Okay, so so what we want to do is we want to make that actually in there, but we want to put it way back here. Cool. And then what we don't need anymore is our frame doesn't need an image on it. So remove component. Okay. Well, actually, technically, we don't even need this frame at all. The frame is this UI window. Ah, well, that's fine. Trying to think how I want to structure this. Because really what I want is this stuff needs to just go inside this UI window. So I can do it like that. And then image frame can go bye-bye. And then now title, I don't need title anymore because title is going to be inside of there. Content doesn't need to be in there. That is good. Content is good. And then our layout buttons can be button fancies. We're so fancy, yo. We're so fancy, yo. Okay, and then we can probably just make our layout a little bit not as wide. Wait, is our and our layout not as wide. Cool. And then let's make our text the semi-bold. The old semi-bold. And then we could probably do best fit. Oh, well, the problem is it's just the text is too big. Oh no! I lost it. It's gone forever. Okay, so then we just need to. Yeah, it's so weird how that has like a weird offset. It's kind of weird, but that's fine. I can adjust for that. Okay, there we go. Then I can take this, copy, copy paste. My favorite thing in the world. All right, what's the font size though? 147. 147. All right, and let's set the text to this sweet blue color that we got going on. All right, And then content. That can also be that blue color, I'm guessing, right? Probably. Yeah, and then this content can also be good old semi-bold. Yeah, semi-bold. Give me some of that semi-bold. All right, so now this can just fit up here. And this can go here. And then UI window. Okay, so UI window we want to be a little bit smaller. Yeah. We know. It's gonna be a little bit smaller. We're getting there, Mr. Text Content. You should be stretched, my good sir. Then you just come on. You just need to fill yourself in here. And then same thing with our button layout. You just need to be a little bit smaller. Okay, so button text is a little too big. So we can do best fit there. That works fine. Cool. And then I don't know what's going on here. It's freaking out. Best fit. Get out of here. All right. Best fits for losers. Okay, there we go. Let's go with like 120. Okay, cool. Alrighty, so now this pop-up should be looking better, I think. So let's let's go and save this now. And then let's nuke that. Maybe. Okay, and then let's hit play. Cool, so options, sell data. Oh, shoot. I know what I did. So I forgot to reset. I got rid of one of the contents, and I did not reset it. So the text. So title text. Apply. Then info text is, yeah, not set to anything, but that's fine. So we can just turn that off for right now. And then apply. Cool. And then let's nuke this, hit play, see what's going on. What's going on? Nope, that's not where I wanted to go. Options. All right, cool. So confirmation. Are you sure you want to reset all your data? No, I don't. Yes, I do. So you can see, yeah, it resets it all. Oh yeah, so then when we reset, which I just did, so yeah, and everything's 0 in here. So let's go through and do a couple of these. Oh yeah, and since it's the pop-up generic is where I'm using a lot of places, you can see, yeah, so it propagated itself to here too. So we're probably not going to use pop-up generic for when you finish a level. That's going to be a new pop-up, which is going to be like stars earned or whatever. But yeah, but cool. Things are starting to come together a little bit though, which is good. Let's go back to menu. Yeah, cool. So yeah, so I think this is where I'm gonna stop for today. I know it's a little bit earlier than normal. Normally I go to pretty close to 11, but like I said, the allergies have just been kicking my butt. So I'm dying over here a little bit. So anyways, so yeah, so this is we're kind of hitting a point now in the stream where I think really all that's left at this point is to go through and go into the game and to set up this HUD using the new UI, okay, and then make it, obviously look a little bit better. And then once that gets set up, then I need to I need to set up the this stars earned, okay, so that way it actually shows like the gems and stuff like that, and maybe it has like a little fancy thing, but pretty much the amount of work that's left is not enough to fill another 3-hour stream for sure. And it's also probably a little bit more than the 40 minutes or so left in this stream. It's probably about an hour to 2 hours of work, maybe. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up making a new video that's like an actual like edited video that's just going to kind of go and show, hey, this is where the app ended up. This is like the final
the final version of the app. So just because there's like not that much work left, and I want to make that video anyway, so I'm probably going to do that little bit of work, but it's nothing different than what I'm already doing, which is just, you know, effectively taking buttons and setting them to different images. Woohoo, nothing too fancy there. So what I'll probably end up doing is going through and doing a video, kind of like a 10-minute, like, hey, here's what the app is, here's the design behind it, here's like how it works, here's some of the fun things about it. Kind of give a little conclusion video that's nice and edited, so that way it's not just me rambling on about stuff, but I can actually sit down and think and be like, hey, this is what it is. Then the secondary thing that I'll do is when it comes to actually submitting to the Android App Store and the iOS App Store, I'll make 2 separate videos, one for each of those. But those have to be edited videos just because there's so much like personal information and stuff like that that goes through when submitting to those independent stores that I need to make sure that I can catch anything that I might accidentally have shown during editing, or I can purposely blur things out like selectively versus like trying to hide the entire screen or anything like that. So this is probably going to be, definitely, well, not definitely, but probably going to be the last stream. Unless I can think of something else that I want to do on stream, just because there's such a small amount of work left, and then the rest of the work that I want to show needs to be edited in order for it to show correctly. So it's been fun. I'm surprised. Like, this is the 9th stream. Each stream is around 3 hours, so it's like 27 hours. I would say by the time it takes to submit to the store and to do, you know, the next like hour or so of like filling in these art images and stuff like that, it's probably going to end up being, I don't know, about 30 hours to make this game total, which is pretty crazy. Like, I thought it was going to take much longer than that, to be completely honest, but kind of coming into a game with like no idea on how to make it and then coming up with something and then actually making it and getting it ready to ship in 30 hours is pretty crazy. It kind of makes me feel like maybe I should just quit my job and literally pump a game out like this every week, because I mean I could easily make one of them in 30 hours as I've shown, so I could just every week just pump one of them out, and then eventually within a year have like 50 games in the store, and hey, you never know what could happen from there. Maybe I'll do that in some magical world. But one thing I'm definitely gonna do is when this project is completely done, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to somehow, what I think I'll end up doing is I might just put all the source code like in the asset store or on GitHub or something like that, just so that way anybody that's following the stream and wants to kind of build it along with them or something along those lines could go and actually look at the code and stuff like that. I mean, obviously all the code is on screen at some point during the stream, so you could visually look at it, but I know it's a lot easier to see it on GitHub or in some form like that. So we'll see. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do for that. I'm not 100% what's the best way to distribute that and whatnot, but there'll probably definitely be some type of resources that I'll link in all these archived videos on YouTube, so that way people following along could actually go through and see the code and stuff like that. I might just make it a Unity Asset Store package that you can download and see what's going on and stuff. Like, I mean, there's nothing too special about this. It's just mainly, I understand where people, if you're just starting and stuff, sometimes it's good to actually get the code in front of you versus trying to watch a video and then write it yourself. So that's something I'll probably end up doing. I'm definitely going to do that for any of my smaller videos that I'm doing, such as, like, I don't know if anybody's seen like the 2-minute tips videos that I started doing on YouTube, but one of them was just what is Unity, and another one was how do you create and use a Unity button. So there's meant to be really beginner, like super simple things, but I definitely want to include all the code, in which I did for like the Unity button one that I did in the video. So I'll try to keep that same mantra for this series as well. I need to finish it because I don't want to put code up and then constantly be changing it. But then number 2, I need to figure out, what's the best way to distribute that and all those things. And I got to make sure as well as a third thing that there's nothing in the code base that could that gives something away, like a personally identifiable thing, if that makes sense. So Anyways, yeah, we'll see. But I would say look. So there won't be a stream next week at this time, obviously. But keep an eye out. There should be a video probably next weekend, I would guess. Or definitely probably the weekend after that. My wedding anniversary is coming up, so I need to figure out what I'm doing for that. Well, I know what I'm doing for that, but I got to figure out when I can work on this game in relation to that and all that fun stuff. But anyways, so what you'll end up getting is there'll be another video put up on YouTube soon that will be, hey, here's the final product. Here was what the design was. Here's all the things that I went through. Here, like almost like a post-mortem, if you're familiar with what that is. So almost like a post-mortem of what it is. Then after that is finished, then there'll be 2 videos. One video of me submitting it to the iOS Android store. Ugh. One of them submitting to the iOS App Store, and one of them submitting to the Google Play Store. And then kind of about like through Unity, how do you actually make a build and send it to those stores and get it approved and all that fun stuff. So anyways, so yeah, so I'll be signing off, but thanks everybody for watching. And if you've watched all the videos, thanks for being there all along. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching the archive. Everything's great. Yeah, so pay attention. There should be new videos coming soon where this thing will be nice and wrapped up. So anything else, like if you guys ever want to see me cover something in either a live stream or like an actual recorded video, please send me an email, send a comment on the YouTube videos, do whatever. Tweet me. I don't care. Facebook, I think I have a page on Facebook, everything. Find me, send me a message, whatever. And yeah, I'll probably cover it because I'm always looking for ideas. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and yeah, stay tuned for more videos.